Welcome back, everyone. I'm Nala.
And I'm Faith.
And this is the Sirens Den breakdown, theories, and things you may have overlooked for episode 4 of The Falcon and Winter Soldier.
So, this is your official spoiler warning.
This episode was intense on so many levels. And I just want to jump right in. I want to take it off with this first scene that is honestly one of my favorite Marvel scenes.
Yeah.
Come out. I haven't felt this way since, I know it wasn't the best, but for me, Iron Man 3 and RDJ's kind of Tony's breakdown and anxiety kind of really resonated with me. And now we get Bucky finally breaking free.
I will give, as much as Iron Man 3 was kind of a disaster, there was a lot of things it did nail. And I think the overall Iron Man arc was one of those.
So I'm so happy that our favorite former assassin gets that same redemption. Let's get into it, Faith.
All right. So our very first scene that we have is Bucky in Wakanda. He and Ayo are at a fire. Notably, he does not have his vibranium arm here. This is before he was given that. And Ayo starts taking him through his Winter Soldier programming, going through the code words. And he's like, it's not going to work. I'm just going to snap and hurt people. And she's like, no, I'll be fine. I'll take care of it. If that happens, we're going to do this. And as she goes through all these code words, he's having flashbacks from all his different moments of the Winter Soldier, from the murders he's had to the trying to break out of it when Steve was around. And then finally, she gets through the whole thing and he doesn't turn into the Winter Soldier. And he just realizes that he is normal, that he's free from that. And he doesn't believe it at first. Ayo tells him, you're free. And he looks up at her and he just looks rough. And she repeats it, that he's free, and he just breaks down. And this poor boy.
Oh my Lord. I was like, way to go. Way to start off in the first 5 minutes. You got me crying. You could just see the torture. You can see it you flash back with him and you're like, wow, he has been through so much. And look at him, he is still trying to do the right thing. Despite everything he's been through, which is, again, arguably so much, he's finally at peace. It was something he's wanted since Winter Soldier. He was trying to find it in Civil War, but unfortunately that didn't work out. And he said he had those couple years of peace in Wakanda, and this is what they are. And I'm so happy for him. Also, him and Ayo, I ship it.
It's a valid ship.
Absolutely.
I'm personally still on team Bucky and Sam, but
I mean, them too, for sure.
Well, actually, I never left team Bucky and Steve, but
again, we're all still there too. Okay. And he had essentially just 1 week of peace before the events of Infinity War happened, and he was given the arm and had to defend the world.
Yeah, no, it really kind of goes back to what he said in the first episode about how his whole life has just been fight after fight after fight, and he had a little bit of moment in peace of Wakanda, and that's it. But something I do think is kind of notable here is, Bucky kind of telling that he's been going into fight after fight after fight after fight without really getting a moment of peace. Yet here he is solving this super soldier problem, getting into fights and violence. And it's kind of been interesting. And this show is really kind of about Bucky moving past himself as the Winter Soldier. And he's already done that via the programming, but he also kind of has to do that in just, his I don't really quite know the right way to put it, but just as a person, he still has to kind of move past and accept what he has done as the Winter Soldier. But I think also more than that, something I've been thinking about just with this episode is the fact that, Bucky as the Winter Soldier, he has been in the world of espionage and assassinations and backhanded, do what you have to do means to justify the end. And that's kind of what his actions have been in The Winter Soldier so far. He's been kind of doing things that maybe not necessarily the good guy would do to meet this end and accomplish this goal, breaking Zemo out of prison being, I
Mhm.
think, the top of the list. So I think it kind of goes back to, even though this scene has shown that he's free from the programming of the Winter Soldier, he still isn't free from the Winter Soldier itself. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit more as we
Mm.
Isaiah Bradley told him that you can't just wake up and change who you are. Uh, and that's kind of true with him as the Winter Soldier. That at the end of the day, no matter how much he is free from the brainwashing of that, the legacy and the harm of the Winter Soldier will live on, which he's well aware of.
To quote, to quote Black Widow, there's a lot of red in his ledger.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I mean, you can't deny that he can easily go back to being the Winter Soldier in terms of like acting like it and taking out his violence in the same way. Which is a little worrying. And Sam brings that up to Bucky when he asks him if he's okay. And you can tell that, having to relive that was hard for Bucky.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just, my final thoughts, I just thought it was a great way to open up the episode. I'm so happy that we get to see Bucky smile and, be genuinely like relieved. Because you can tell he's just so tired. And so it was nice that he finally did get to put that behind him. But of course, as you can see, we don't know if that's, fully gonna stay. I mean, give Sebastian Stan a freaking Emmy along with Elizabeth Olsen. They deserve it. They
Mhm.
are. I love how they are bringing us into phase 4 of the MCU. They're like, oh, you liked the fun lightheartedness of the first 3 phases? Get ready for grief and pain.
Hey, one of
Absolutely.
them
Yep.
was able to secure therapy, I'll have you know.
It was secured for him.
Is anyone surprised that John Walker isn't a man of therapy?
No, I'm not surprised. It would probably do him a world of good.
Oh, yeah.
As we'll talk about by the end of this episode. But we cut back to present day Bucky and Io.
So it's back where we left off at the end of the last episode with Io being like, where the heck is Zemo? And Bucky and her kind of have this exchange where she's like, dude, he killed our king, and we freed you from brainwashing and give you an arm, and you freed him from prison. And Bucky is just like, yeah, he's a means to an end. And Io, like, you can tell she's not necessarily happy with that answer, but she does give him an extra 8 hours to do what he needs to do before the Wakandans are coming for him. Yeah, which does bring us back to Bucky returning to Sam and Zemo and immediately telling them that the Wakandans are here and that they have 8 out. They bought some time, but that's ultimately how this is going to end. And then they kind of go talking into just kind of the, oh God, what are we gonna do next? Zemo realizes, I think, in this point that, oh, the people are here to capture me because of course they are, because I killed their king. So he's gonna need a little bit more staying power if he wants to get through this without being taken by the Wakandans. They kind of talk about kind of the back and forth. Do you have anything more to offer us? And Zemo is like, no, like we can find the I on yeah, Zemo goes into a kitchen and like pulls out a jar of Turkish delight, and he's like, "Oh, Turkish delight," as he dumps them on the desk. And that's the most important part of the scene. Weirdly enough, it's a plant for later.
Um, I will just give my little unpopular opinion that Turkish delights are gross.
I
They looked really delicious in Narnia, but
Turkish
um
delight hate hour.
no, I do appreciate his strategy. I mean, Zemo has already is known to be a man of strategy. So, yeah, he's playing the long game. He's 2 steps ahead. He is already thinking of how he's going to escape 8 hours from now. And how to get that information. He's a very complicated villain. I do
Really fun to watch
appreciate
as a
it.
villain, I
He
will say,
is.
though. Also, I love how mean Sam and Bucky are to him all the time.
They really are. They fully do Baron Zemo hate hour. They just roast him.
They kind of bond over it, really, which, is
And
how the best friendships are made. I do remember that does remind me how they transitioned into this scene is that while they're having this back and forth, they're like, "Oh my god, on the news, they blew up a building." Uh, Sam kind of talks about how when his TT died, how there's a big community memorial and how there's probably going to be something like this for Mama Danya since she was a big community leader. This is my Sam Wilson impression.
that's a
Um,
great Sam.
I've been working on it.
We only provide the best quality impressions on this show. That's what people are
if
here
if
for that.
if they ever all I'm saying is if they ever need a stand-in for Anthony Mackie and they need a white girl to do it and Scarlett Johansson isn't available, call your girl up. And Scarlett Johansson isn't available, obviously.
I love it. She's like, I'm no longer in the franchise. I got to get work where I can get it.
Oh yeah, that was a great moment. When Sam called his aunt his TT, Bucky's like, "What's your TT?" And they just kind of have this fun back and forth about that particular piece of terminology, which I also feel like that's not the weirdest thing to call your aunt, even in the 40s. And that brings us to the Flag Smashers in a very short scene. They're in a really cool ruiny looking area and they're watching the news and they're like the news is like in response to the Flag Smashers we're gonna close borders up sooner and Carly's like how could they, and that's the scene. I really wish that because clearly they kind of had an idea for all of these different characters within the Flag Smashers. And again, we know that they had to change a bunch of things. They had a whole plot line about a pandemic, and that's probably where we're missing some of these. But I want to get more of them. I want to know each of these guys' personal deal. We kind of got a little bit of that one guy, Nico, in this one.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely see where they didn't quite flesh out the story. And I mean, I don't have much to say on this scene either. I have more to say on when they're at the gravestone.
I will say, just because I think the theme that's going to be coming up, especially in these episodes, is just it was a little bit choppy and cut around because they had to change the plot line, and you can kind of tell, which is unfortunate. But I will say, I do genuinely enjoy these Flag Smasher storyline where it is right now. It's not perfect. It's not. It could be cleaner, but it's been fun. And like I said last episode, I really enjoy Carly Morgenthau as a kind of follow-up villain to the aftermath of Thanos, where his thing was about resources and who's them and making sure that there's enough for plentiful for everybody, and her being a direct response of we did have that for a little bit because half the world disappeared and we worked together, and now people are it's going back to the way things were. So I think she's really interesting, and I think that part's cool. You get none of that from this scene though.
So that takes us to our next scene, which is the payoff to those nasty Turkish delights. Sam, Bucky, and Zemo go to the refugee camp. So Sam goes inside and asks around for anyone who knows or who knew Mama Danya, and people are avoiding him. They are, going the other way, shutting doors. He is not getting much luck until he speaks with a tutor who is in there and asks about Mama Danya, and he says he's not going to tell him. And they get to talking. And, again, you get to see the stark contrast between, John Walker's Captain America and how he approaches situation and getting information versus how Sam does it. He ends up talking to this tutor and learning the information of how people were affected by the blip, which he was not a part of. He was one of the people who got blipped. So he doesn't really know what the survivors, quote unquote, had to go through. And he's kind of starting to understand more and more the cause that they're fighting for. Zemo, on the other hand, knows straight where to go. He goes to the kids, gives them some Turkish delights. They love it. and he earns the favor of a young girl who tells him where the memorial is going to be held.
Can you imagine the type of info he could get if he gave him good candy?
They would have been like, "Oh, actually." Could you actually imagine how far he would go as a villain if he just offered the heroes candy?
Yeah, if
Like,
he's
why
like,
go through all the code words for Bucky? I think he could have just given him some Turkish delights and Bucky would have gladly caused civil war.
it's true. It's true. Yeah. A really big notable point of the scene with Sam and Nico is that he is really starting to relate to these people and their struggle. He, as we've seen earlier, has also kind of been shut out from the system, and it's really kind of starting to feel like and really be confirmed that the favor is being put to not just those that were blipped, but those that were blipped and privileged and in power. And a lot of the changes that were might have been for the good that have been being made since the blip have really been just fixing the status quo about all these kind of privileged, rich, global jerks being like, oh, we can't have all this. Change it immediately. So I think it's ultimately going to show Sam siding with Carly somewhere down the line.
And yeah, like I said before, you really remembering the previous episode and how John Walker dealt with getting information from the Flag Smashers and their base. Sam obviously has that different approach. He has that Steve Rogers approach, which is, because in the first Captain America, Stanley Tucci talks about how this kind of stuff is not for perfect soldiers; it's for good men. And John Walker is a perfect soldier, and Sam Wilson is a good man, and that is very, very clear in this episode, starting with this scene.
Yes, yes, yes. So they go back to their base after Zemo's like, "Oh, I didn't know anything." And then at the base, Zemo's like, "I lied. I do know where the funeral's gonna happen, and you're gonna take me there because I need the leverage." Kind of going into, he's here for the long con. Zemo's a very smart man. He knows that he's in a very fragile situation. He was broken out of prison. The two people who broke him out of prison hate him and would love to send him back, and the Wakandans are here for him. They're not coming for him. They are currently here for him. So unless he offers something that can kind of extend his usefulness and his worth, then that's just where he's going to head. And he knows that. Uh,
Definitely a smart villain.
yeah. The other notable thing about the scene, other than Zemo being like, "I know where the funeral is," that's my Zemo impression. Also been working really hard on it.
Wonderful.
Is that Sam, Bucky, and Zemo have this really interesting conversation about Carly and her motives. If she's ultimately a good guy, if she can be redeemed. And Zemo has this really interesting kind of talk about how she's an extremist. That once someone decides to take the super soldier serum or just decides to be more than that, that they've already kind of crossed this humanity line, because they're already seeing themselves as more or as like the hero. Um, with the exception being Steve Rogers, but they notably say there hasn't been another man like Steve Rogers. Yeah, because he kind of talks about how soldiers shouldn't exist. And Sam's like, "Well, what about Bucky, that guy?"
Mm-hmm. They take this opportunity to give one final roast to Zemo, talking about how he's just going to do his stupid head tilt thing, and it actually, Zemo stops and is like, "Oh, they were right." And he straightens his head, and I just think it's so funny that he is also starting to be like, they're like, we know you now. You're very predictable.
Did
And
I blip again?
maybe it makes him reconsider what, their part is in his plan. Also, he's just again a dweeb.
That brings us to Carly and Nico go to a graveyard. It is not Mama Donya's grave. It is another grave. Whose grave it is? No idea. But that's where
It's
the super.
it's Nico's dad, no?
So yeah, the grave is Nico's grandfather, I guess. Uh, but notably, it doesn't matter whose grave it is because that's where they're hiding the super soldier serum. They get a pouch out of a kind of hidden puzzle box in the grave, and they have kind of this conversation about heroes. And Nico talks to Carly about how he used to be a Captain America fan, how as a kid that was his idol, and how he didn't think anyone else could be like that until he met Carly. Which I think is supposed to narrow down that at the end of the day, she's an idealist. She truly and he truly sees her as fighting for the greater good. Obviously, we know that she's nothing like Cap because she bombed a building full of civilians.
I really liked this scene and the foreshadowing that we'll find out later. Um, but again, it's just more of the inner workings and the inner thoughts of these characters and, more of their motivations. And I do like the fact that he is also a super soldier. He has the same power that Cap could have. And even though he looked up to him, and he has that same power, he's not using it like his idol was. And I mean, you can obviously see that now Cap's the symbol of Cap has been bastardized by John Walker and how he's been handling everything. And he might see those same qualities in Carly, or at least he was previously, because I don't think he witnessed her actually blow up her car. I believe that was another flag smasher member.
Yeah, it was a different guy in the car with her, but I mean, they all know she did it. They were watching the news about it, so he knows that she did that. Yeah, Battlestar's kind of. I mean, from what we've seen, is he's kind of John's grounding force. He was
I
the
think
one
we
who was
called him
there to.
his like moral compass essentially.
So they're off to the funeral, Sam, Bucky, and Zemo, and then John Walker's like, "Hold on, just a minute there. I'm Captain America, and you've gone too far." And then him and Battlestar show up, and they just want to get in on the action. Sam, Bucky, and Zemo are like, "Yeah, whatever, fine. This is what we're gonna do." And then Walker's like, "We're gonna bust in there." And then Sam's like, "No, I'm gonna talk to her alone because have experience in counseling people through grief. I think I could reach her." And Walker's like, "Therapy? What's that?" And Battlestar's like, "I think that's a great idea." And they go to the funeral after agreeing to let these two come along.
Again, I appreciate how they're going incognito, but not John Walker. He is full out there in flaunting his Captain America uniform. Obviously, people on the street recognize him. And he's sapping it all up, and that's not what Steve did. And that's not what any of the others do either, because they don't want to draw attention to themselves. They don't see, being heroes as being flashy. And like Sam didn't go to the memorial service in his full Falcon gear. That's not what he was going to do. So, you're already again seeing the different approach between these two caps, essentially.
Mm-hmm. They get to the funeral, and
I will say before they do get to the funeral, they get led by that girl again, and he gives her, like a $500 bill that he says to, use this to go help her family. So again, making us like Zemo a little more. And I don't know if I don't know if it was like a kind of like a show offy moment.
I think
If
it
he's
was
trying to
more
like assert his dominance, I don't know.
kind of what I got from it because I think the implication here is where they're at used to be Sokovia. It
Hmm.
is part of Lithuania or Lithuania? No, Latvia. It's part of Latvia now, but it used to be Sokovia. So really, this refugee camp is a place that Zemo knew. So I don't think it was necessarily out of him showing off how rich he is. I think it's seeing what has become of his home, or just this is what has become of his home, and wanting to. Because ultimately, I think Zemo does care about the greater good. He does care about the people of the world and his community. Ultimately, it's very twisted guidance, but that is what does kind of guide him. It's wanting to do right, but through justice, or wanting justice for his people. Justice in preventing any super soldiers from ever existing ever again, so nothing like this can ever happen, and justice in God, they're destitute. Here's $500 for helping.
I can't do more than that. Walker agrees to give them 10 minutes to get to Carly, to talk her down, uh, which feels like a not
Yeah,
that long
that
amount of time.
it doesn't. He absolutely set him up for that, which
Uh,
oh,
Carly, during Mama Donya's funeral, has this really beautiful speech about changing the world for the better, not letting the power to continue to keep them down, how it's up to them as a community to fight for themselves as a community. And she sees Sam watching from the bleachers. After the funeral, Sam goes down to talk to her. And I think this was probably one of my favorite scenes in the whole thing. Just the human connection that they were able to have. Sam is
mhm.
so good at grief counseling, and he truly does kind of understand where she's coming from and where this hurt and anger is going. And he really does start to break through to her.
I know, which makes me think that obviously maybe she won't be the final villain by the end. Like I think he just like Steve has been able to do, he definitely knows how to de-escalate the situation and how to connect with people as a human first and then deal with the problems that they're presenting. And I
Mm-hmm.
agree with you. I absolutely love this scene because again, this whole show is essentially just giving you two versions of the same character and how different they are and how necessary that difference is.
Yeah.
Because of
I
course, Captain America is like a badass and he knows how to fight and he does know how to, you know, throw down. But at the end of the day, he was Steve Rogers, the guy who jumped on a grenade to save other people. It's about other people. It's not so much about himself.
mm-hmm. I also really like the scene because I think it shows that Carly, at the end of the day, is just a kid who's kind of in way over her head. And I think talking with Sam really exposed that. Uh,
Mhm.
he kind of talks about what Zemo said earlier about how she's a supremacist and she's appalled by the idea, but
Mhm.
he still is able to get her to admit like, oh, those people are just like in my way for my greater path. And Sam's like, you just said that, and she's like, you tricked me. And he's like, yeah, but you still said it. And that's when she's really kind of starts. I What I really liked about that is you can see her start to really question herself and what she's been doing.
Mhm.
Um,
But not just that, I loved her being like, "What? No, I'm not," and like having this kind of banter with Sam in a way that she kind of forgot everything that was like happening and was just having this little like she was like trying to defend herself against someone that she wasn't really so trusting of. But then you could see that, yeah, at the end of the day, she's a kid, and that's funny because that's what Sam says. He says, "She's just a kid." And Steve has said, "She's just a kid," or "He's just a kid," so many times.
mhm. And it kind of goes back to, I think, back to Age of Ultron, where
Mhm.
when they first met Pietro and Wanda, who are just these nuclear weapons who were against them, he was like one of the main ones who was really advocating for, they're just kids. Let's hear them out. Let's like we can't harm them. They're
Mhm.
kids. And it really kind of goes to show how similar him and Steve are. The other thing I think is kind of maybe notable about this scene is that, Carly is a very hostile, paranoid person. We've seen this just through her actions, how she reacts to danger previously. And her immediate reaction to seeing Sam at Mama Donya's funeral was not to throw down. She was willing to have kind of this heart to heart conversation. She didn't try and fight him. And I almost wonder, I think back to the conversation she had about Captain America, if maybe it's because in her mind she also did believe in Cap. She believed in what he stood for, and with that, in Sam.
Yeah, no, absolutely wonderful scene. I'm stoked for Sam to take up that mantle because clearly John Walker doesn't deserve it. So, which we clearly see the opposite of in John Walker in this next scene where he's so impatient and he's going to go in before those 10 minutes are even up. To which Bucky stops him and says, "No, you can't. You got to like trust Sam and let him do it." And I love the foreshadowing that John says in this scene of you're going to let your partner be in there with the super soldier alone, he might get hurt. And that kind of hits Bucky, to a point where he's considering letting him through. And, you know, we'll get to the part that it foreshadows, but eventually he still says no until those 10 minutes are up. And then when John comes in, that's when stuff starts to get even worse. Because he comes in guns a blazing, literally, literally just screaming that Carly Morgenthau's under arrest. And obviously that doesn't look good on Sam because she thinks that he set this whole thing up. And now that trust that was kind of built was broken.
Yeah. Can we also talk about the fact that, you know, one of the big things in the first episode that we meet John Walker is that he loses Sam's favor when he calls Sam his Captain America's sidekick. But in this episode, he refers to Sam and Bucky as partners, and he refers to Battlestar as partners. And I don't think that word choice is accidental. I think it really kind of goes to show that he truly did view Sam as the sidekick, but he views Battlestar as his collaborator, and I think that's really interesting.
I'd also just like to say that you see Sam and Bucky's relationship really, really change in these past few episodes to where Bucky is, you know, for that second is like, oh my goodness, he's right. Sam's in there alone. I need to do something. And then starts to see Sam for who he is, which is like an absolutely capable partner. As we're having this nice heart to heart moment where Sam is really getting through to Carly, of course, John Walker has to storm in and ruin everything
Because
by
he's a dip.
this is our John Walker hate hour starting now.
Lasting forever.
Lasting forever. Continuation of our everlasting segment. So he walks in, he busts in, and of course Carly thinks that this has been a setup from Sam in the first place, which really sucks because, again, Sam was really exhibiting some true Cap qualities of being a good man and like really, you know, talking to her like a human being, which she is, and using his grief counselor background to mediate the situation. And then John, of course, is just like red blooded and storms in. So they have a whole chase scene, and they get split up around the house. All right, Faith, take that action away.
Yeah, so John Walker busts in like a dip, and Carly's like, "Oh, you're working for Captain America," and she dips because she's not gonna fight 3 superheroes right now. So they go on this huge chase sequence. Some of the other Flag Smashers kind of are like, "Oh shoot, Carly's in trouble," and like kind of disrupt the situation. They end up all getting separated. Carly kind of books it down, just off that second story into on the floor into a basement, and that's where Zemo is waiting for her. He shoots at her. She ducks behind like I think it was a desk, and she drops all the super soldier serum. And right before Zemo is about to kill her, he's like, "Oh wait, shoot, is this what I think it is?" And she doesn't respond, and he just starts smashing all those super soldier serums. That's when Niku busts in like a hero, kind of ushers Carly out of there, gets her out of safety. And Carly gets away. Zemo has accomplished his goal, and that's that.
Which I thought was interesting.
And bonk.
Yeah. Until donk, he gets knocked out by Cap's shield being wielded by John Walker. And I thought this scene was very interesting because for a split second, I literally like threw all reason out the window, and I was like, is he gonna throw all reason out the window and realize that the only way to beat these guys is to join them and take the super soldier serum? So when he just started smashing it, I was like, all right, awesome. He's still very, very strict about his morals.
Yeah, no, it was interesting because there's definitely that moment of, oh shoot, soldier Zemo, super strength Zemo, and yeah, he has no interest, just as he said he didn't. And I think that's what makes him such a cool character, is he really does have that strong, misguided moral code that, and it's just been really interesting to see how it's played out here. I know a lot of people. I've seen some Zemo hate and how he's been portrayed in this, and I do not get it. I mean, I've seen a lot of what I think are really bad takes of Falcon and the Winter Soldier online. Zemo people not really liking his characterization here being one of them. A lot of people are like, he's too doofy now, and I'm like, what are you talking about? Because you got to remember, he was just a baron with a family before this. Like, it sounds like a very happy family. Like, he was rich, yeah, but he was also just a guy who was not anywhere in this world, and he had that all taken away from him, and he kind of just went to extremes with that. And so I like seeing the kind of like doofiness, because he was a human being before this, guys. He wasn't some v- moral superior with these moral opinions, and I'm gonna kill to do it before this Avengers just destroyed a country.
Yeah, I mean, you have to realize that he wasn't like a villain for his whole life. He had a personality before it was, being a villain. And it was nice to see some of that shine. Anyway, he gets donked out, which must have hurt, I must say. It's a good thing vibranium is light,
Mhm.
because it might have, as we will later talk about later on this episode. That shield has the potential to be very detrimental.
Yeah, it kind of does go to show you that John Walker. I mean, I guess actually no, this would have been before he took the serum. I was gonna say, if he wanted to kill Zemo, he could have, but he might have been trying there, but he couldn't because it was free strength. But yeah, so they get him out of there, and John Walker stays behind because he sees something out of the corner of his eye, and it is a super soldier serum that Zemo did not see and did not smash, and his eyes kind of like light up, like, oh, this is my chance. This is my chance to truly be Captain America. So Carly and Nico are on a balcony, and they're like, "Oh God, we should have moved sooner with the super soldier serum. What was the odds that we all would have been assigned to the same quarter together? I thought we were special." And then she gets a text from the power broker, which is another text that's like, "Bitch, I'm gonna kill you." But this time the other flag smashers are there to see it, and they're like, "Oh shit, you just got a text that said the power broker wants to kill you." And she's like, "Okay, well, I know what we're gonna do. We're gonna kill Captain America." And she also goes into like how she doesn't think Sam's a big problem or whatever. But yeah, it's just kind of exposition.
I do like that she is starting to trust Sam a little bit
Mhm.
in terms of being like, he is very, very different from John.
Yeah.
But yeah, we go into the next scene because we're gonna come back to them. Back with the gang, Zemo and friends.
So it starts off with Sam messaging, I think, Sharon, being like, "Keep your eye on Walker." Kind of to remind us, oh yeah, he asked her to do something and she's in this. Zemo is like resting with like an ice pack on his head, like very dramatically. And I think it was like a whiskey
He's
glass.
so
He's in his
extra.
turtleneck. He's in his he's still in his backpack. He's still in his little Zemo backpack. Anyway, yeah, he kind of has this whole thing about how super soldiers, they shouldn't exist, blah 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 blah. They should all die. And Sam's like, "What about Bucky?" And Zemo doesn't answer that. And then Bucky gets back. They kind of have a little bit of their banter. They kind of go into the back into the debate that they've been having the whole series of, you didn't take up the shield, this blah 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 blah. John Walker busts in again, and he's like, "We're taking Zemo," and Sam and Bucky tell him to f off. And then our girls get there, our best girls.
Yes, Dora Milaje. I absolutely loved this scene, and I love that tweet going around of one of the members of the Dora Milaje being the only Captain America we recognize right now.
Mhm.
Oh, Captain, my Captain. That fight scene was glorious. Not only did John Walker get, his butt kicked,
By the Dora
but
Milaje.
yes, it was also just so fun seeing the other characters. Zemo is just like, oh, this is all for me. Are you guys fighting on my behalf?
Yeah, like before they start the fight, Sam's like, "Dude, you're better off facing super soldiers than facing these guys."
Yep.
And Walker's like, they don't have jurisdiction here," and they're like, "Where's freaking Dora Milaje? Jurisdiction means nothing to us."
Mhm.
And like Black Panther, you know what he did when someone killed their king? He went on a vigilante rampage to catch the guy he thought it was, who was Bucky, and he was wrong, and then he took Bucky back to Wakanda.
Regardless, it was an awesome fight scene, a lot of flips and twirls. I just, obviously love the start of it, because again, they're like really don't mess with these guys. Seriously, you don't know what you're doing. And of course, John, being the dip he is, does, and they just absolutely kick his butt. And Sam and Bucky are just looking on. They don't have to fight. They're not in this. But he does. I love Bucky saying, "Looking good, John," like a little cheerleader he is, little sassy, sarcastic man he's becoming. Zemo uses this time to escape, obviously, and Bucky and Sam join the fight. And I love this part because they don't really want to fight. They're like being very like they're not using their best moves.
They very much only get involved because they're like, oh, they're actually gonna kill Captain America and Lamar, and we don't want that.
But another favorite part of this scene is Io doing some like Ty Chi stuff to Bucky's arm, and it just falls off like Buzz Lightyear from Toy Story. It was great. The look he gives her, he's so upset. He's like, "How could you do this to me?" Yeah, he is bewildered. He's shook. And she looks guilty as well.
For telling them, "Bast damn you."
Yeah. Zemo has obviously escaped, so that whole fight was for nothing. Well, I guess the whole fight was for something, because when the other Dora Milaje takes the spear out from the table that was, she speared the shield through the table, took it out, flipped up the shield onto her own arm, looked so cool, Cap style, looked so cool. And obviously humiliated John, and he's very upset. And I believe, because after this he says they weren't even super soldiers. They weren't. They're just really well trained and disciplined.
Yeah. And it's also like, dude, they told you that they're stronger than super soldiers when they showed up. Like you confirmed what was told to you. Congratulations.
Yep. Congrats. But it does kind of give us more foreshadowing and more of an insight into his own mind. And what he's been thinking, because he's been considering taking the super soldier serum for a long time, and now this kind of just was the final nail in the coffin.
So yeah, that leads us to John and Lamar kind of have this conversation where John brings up, hypothetically, if if you were offered a chance to take the super soldier serum, would you take it? And they kind of go into how like Lamar was like, heck yeah, like it would be such a great opportunity to just be the best that I can be, and I could have saved so many more people. And then John kind of asks him, do you think that I would be good if I took it? And he's like, yeah, man, you'd be great for it. If it brings out who you are, then you'd be perfect for it. And kind of ends it on like back to they would have been able to save so many of their comrades had they been able to have that power. And a lot of we know he does take the super soldier serum, whether it was before or after this. Like it could be before. I might just be reading too much into it. But I mean, John doesn't seem like the type of guy to ask permission to make a decision like that. But he does seem like the type of guy who has been questioning all of his decisions up to this point. So it might just be more getting reassurance from his friend that he did make the right choice just now to inject it, especially because if it was like he was so upset from losing to the Dora that he just went and took it and then was like, oh shit. Because as we know later, he impulse decision, it's in the heat of battle or something that he does, especially when he's in agony.
For sure.
Lamar says anchored, but that doesn't necessarily mean that like the bad qualities aren't there. It's because he's his anchor that's who he goes to for, did I make the right decision?
I think John has he has had inclinations of wanting to take the super soldier serum. That's been made clear as well.
Yeah, that too. That too.
And yeah, he does get carried away with things. So I think he saw the opportunity and he took it.
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of cuts to we're back with Sarah. Really gorgeous shot on a dark dock. And she gets a
Mhm.
call from Coley Morgenthau, who's like, I know your brother. You better tell him to meet me here because I know who you are and your family. And then it cuts to that's the scene. It's mainly just set up that ooh, Carly's being spooky. Yeah, so they get the call that's like or Sam gets the call. They don't show Sarah on the side of the call. It's just Sam on the phone, which I wonder if this was maybe a reshoot point.
Maybe.
Because it felt weird to not have her on the phone, especially because
Mhm.
she was the one who just got this threat.
Right.
But yeah, and then Sam's like, "Oh God," she said, "Go alone," and Bucky's like, "I'm going with you."
Because now they're working as a team.
Because they're teammates.
I love them. She said, you know, they're in their full gear. They look so great. But this is when stuff obviously gets a lot more intense as we go on to our final battle scene of the episode. And what a battle scene it is. So obviously, Sam goes and is upset at Carly for threatening his sister. That kind of crossed a line with him. He's been trying to reason with her, and now she's like completely gone off the rails. But obviously, John and Lamar know where, have been tracking Sam and Bucky and know where they are as well. So they come once again.
Yeah. So we kind of bust in on this raid after like Sam and Bucky immediately find out with Carly, like, oh, this is what she's planning because Sam gets the call from like Sharon going, I got eyes on Walker, he's here. And so they're like, oh God, it's a trap. That was my Sharon Carter impression. Yeah. It's a very versatile impression. Embodies a lot of people. Work smarter, not harder is what I always say. But yeah, they bust in to do this raid on the Flag Smashers, get their hero moment. First off, though, Sam and Bucky realize that that's what's about to happen. And Carly tries to stop them, but they kick her to the curb pretty easily and like shoot off. And then Carly chases after them. Lamar and Walker go in on the building that they thought it was. And that's when they split up. They're going in kind of FBI style with like their guns. But yeah, they split up and he realizes that he's gone and he kind of like starts to lose it a little bit. Once he realizes that Lamar is in danger and not in his sight. Because he also hears like that gunshot in the distance too. And he sees, I think, didn't he find like Lamar's gun dropped in where? Yeah, but yeah, he busts through the door to rescue Lamar. And just he doesn't look too good either. He's like sweating. His eyes are like really bugged out. Did you? I'm kind of like watching it now. His pupils are dilated. Like
Ooh.
yeah, like, I mean, he's, like, kind of twitching the whole time, but, like, his eyes are huge. So that's cool. Yeah, he looks like a cat about to attack in the screen.
So I'd just like to point out that the first scene of John busting in is very reminiscent to the way Cap used to bust in, especially with a gun. But that was namely in the first Captain America. I don't think he has used a gun since.
John, like, goes in to rescue Lamar. He's immediately ambushed by one of them, and they grapple, but not for too long. Like, John's able to kick that guy to the curb and, like, yucks his shield into the wall.
Exactly, because again, I think he has been super soldiered.
Oh, at this point, definitely.
He also
and
brings.
Yeah, it just it cuts back and forth between him fighting different Flag Smashers and getting through, and Sam and Bucky racing to the scene before Sam is finally able to get there right as John Walker kicks a guy through a door.
Yeah.
And
I will
he
say-
watches him fight this guy and is like, "Oh, that's super strength."
He's like, that something's not right here. But I will say John Walker did bring a gun to a knife fight.
Mhm.
And he definitely mentions that. What's with all the knives? Yeah, and it's really it's the last time we really see him kind of like a sane human being with a quippy line. Because after this, he basically goes crazy
Yeah.
as a human, essentially, before he eventually just shuts down into soldier, like blind soldier mode.
Mhm. Yeah, so he's able to get to Lamar, and Lamar is able to break free. The Flag Smashers grab Walker, they hold him down. Carly like runs in for a finishing blow, but Lamar jumps in and takes it instead of him and gets knocked into a pillar and is dead. Like straight
Oh,
up. Uh
poor Lamar. And it's such a bummer because I was like, I'd like to see, more of Lamar. Maybe he goes against John Walker, blah, blah, blah. But no, I guess he's the one who got fridged.
I do appreciate that it wasn't his wife this time. I mean that could still happen. Who knows? But I mean,
Mhm.
I feel like he was in the show more than a lot of characters who get fridged with, or his specific purpose wasn't just to die.
Mhm.
Like he actually did things. Which I feel like if they had killed her off, then that she'd be there to be like, oh, you're gonna do great, honey. So, and once Walker realizes that Lamar's dead, he snaps. He chases the Flag Smashers out of the building. He jumps out a window to catch one of them, and he ends up catching up with Lamar, or not Lamar, with Nico, the guy who we saw at the beginning of the episode, who talked about how he used to be a Captain America fan. He was also the one who held Walker to get that finishing blow, and the last thing that guy says is, "It wasn't me," before Cap yucks his shield into his body. Where in his body? It's implied it's implied that he cut off his head. Um, that's
Woof.
But they homage hitting him in the chest because I think Disney was like, "Whoa." And also, just because he didn't hit, we saw it hit the chest doesn't mean it didn't also hit. Like he could have aimed those blows out.
Yeah,
Um,
he could have, and he could have also just not done it in the first place. Like Steve Rogers would never.
Yeah. I
I
saw I
mean,
saw
he
a lot of
had.
people after this be like, "Steve Rogers has a body count too." And it's like, "Yeah, no, he does. None of them were in cold blood vengeance kills, and
Mhm.
also most of them were Nazis, and if the ones that weren't were aliens." So,
Of
you
course,
know.
his Civil War fight with Tony, he jabbed his shield into the chest piece, but
And then
he like immediately regretted it.
yeah, he like stopped and threw down the shield like, "Oh, I took it too far."
So obviously Cap and or not Cap. So Sam and Bucky run out as Nico dies. Carly watches the whole thing. She's mortified. Cap also, John Walker has this moment of, oh no, what did I just do? Especially when he gets up and sees that everyone has been filming him. And obviously, the name of the episode is The Whole World is Watching. So that's, this has become a viral thing. Now his legacy has been stained. Like he stained the shield. And that's the last shot we get in the episode.
What an ending shot.
Oof, oof. Just like really, it sent chills because we've seen that shot before. We've seen it when Cap has been victorious and, proud. And now it's just full of blood.
Yeah. I honestly gotta say, I think this has been some of my favorite just like cinematography and like art direction to come out of Marvel. Like even like honestly, I'd say like cinematically, I think it even beats WandaVision a little bit. Like there's just been so much care put into just
Yeah.
making a pretty image that's visually poignant.
Oh yeah,
And there
WandaVision was very much like an homage to all these different eras,
Mhm.
but this is a Marvel film taken to the next level with how, stretched out the story is.
Yeah.
And how much care they're putting into, because we know these characters so well at this point that you need to make the frame a little more interesting, and they do a great job. Well, tune in next episode as we continue going through this awesome, wonderful series.
Tell us what you thought of episode 4 in the comments, or send us an email at sirensdenpodcast@gmail.com.
Thank you to our producer and to Sean Thomas at fuzzstudio.com for our theme song.
Catch you next time. Bye.